This is a recording of an X Space hosted by Her Majesty Queen Bee and your Uncle Owl. To join these spaces every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, check the show notes for details.
Well, here we go. I think everyone that's with us knows. Please come up and chat. We are always wide open. Hope to get to hear from everyone. And you can either request a speaker or send one of us a message. We'll make sure we invite you to speak. Tonight, we hope to be a little bit back and forth. We would like to have a Q&A, and the joke title is Stump the Queen. The kind of questions you think are insurmountable or the most common, what do you want to call them, most common denominators for why people have excuses or resistance to homeschooling. We'd like to discuss all of those. We've been discussing the top two. Well, we think they're kind of the top two that you hear the most often. The concerns for whether or not your child will be properly socialized, or knowing that you're going through the proper curriculum to take care of your children. We've been enjoying busting that up for the last few weeks, and we're going to keep doing that with some other topics coming soon. But we thought we'd make this a little bit more open-ended, have a little bit back and forth, and discuss some things that we wanted to bring up in a related way. Your Majesty, any opening thoughts or greetings?
I don't know about thoughts, but greetings, everybody. I should let you guys know that I think Jordan was homeschooled, right, Jordan?
I was indeed. Back when homeschooling wasn't so common.
Back when homeschooling made you part of the resistance?
Yes, exactly.
Great. My wife's sister, my brother's sister-in-law, and their kids are over at our house this week. They live in Illinois, and they're visiting. And they are all homeschooled. Their mother and father do an excellent job of homeschooling them. Their mother is basically a co-op homeschooling mom who takes care of maybe 20 children. And they are doing really well. They were unpacking a lot of the things that they are experiencing, good and bad. And it's been fun to chat with them this week.
What was the bad?
If you could call it bad. Some of it is a couple of the co-op families. When you do certain things together, and Illinois sort of expects a little bit more structure than some states. So they were doing for a couple of years, making the primary gathering for their homeschool being about science for a couple of years. And then they switched it to being about language and reading and writing. And apparently all of the kids started dropping like flies because it was centered around reading and writing, which apparently is less entertaining than science. And don't get me wrong, I'm not quibbling with that point, but trying to figure out what to do about that, and trying to sort through, well, then what's the best thing to do next, and make sure we're taking care of everyone's desires, needs, whatever. Both of my in-laws, my sister-in-law and her husband, they were sort of saying, so you can't just tell your kids to figure out something that they actually want to read, and figure out something that they actually want to write about, and meaning that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to force a subject on them. But anyway, all of their kids who are also in the same program, they have 3, are doing the same thing, and they're just loving it. They're just crack-a-lacking, reading. What's this series? It's called Steelhead. I haven't read it yet. It's for younger kids. And this is the nephew. This is the nephew that gave me my name. He's the first one that ever called me Uncle Al. And he's just ripping through this kind of big, long series for young adults, young kids, and telling me all about it. It's fun to watch him read as much as he does.
That's cute. That's awesome. How old is he?
He's
ish.
12. He is 12.1.
Nice.
He's a good kid, too. His dad's awesome. His dad is an engineer. He works for Rivian, which is cool. Okay. Shall we?
We shall.
Okay. Well, my first question is, did anyone come with a rebuttal or objection or a Stump the Queen contest question? If not, I am prepared, but I thought I would invite someone to take the first shot. Or maybe I should actually encourage Her Majesty to take the first shot. What's the most common thing you hear besides socialization curriculum? We've been chatting about that. We'll have some more discussions about that. But anything that has come up recently that you've wanted to get into a little bit more?
Yeah, a lot of a lot of people ask, or not so nicely tell me that you can't work and homeschool at the same time. And I've not only found that to be patently untrue in my own life, I don't know that many homeschoolers who don't have two working parents. And almost, I mean, well, that's not true. Maybe like 50-50. But the moms usually have like a part-time job or some kind of side gig. So there's a big myth out there that you have to have one parent that stays at home exclusively and sits the kids down for 8 hours a day between the hours of 8 and 2 or 8 and 3 or whatever it is, and homeschools the kids at the kitchen table with their piles of books next to them. And I did meet some kids growing up that did it like that, actually, and I know people that do it like that now, but that's not the way that it works in most homeschooling families. So the way that I've done it, we've done it a few different ways. So since I'm a nurse, I have worked part-time. I had the weekend option. I did Friday and Saturday nights, and then King Bee took care of the kids like Saturday while I slept, basically, and most of Sunday. Although Sunday, I didn't sleep that much Sunday, even though I just worked all Sunday night. I would go to church, or all Saturday night. I would go to church on Sunday, and then I'd come home and take a long nap, maybe like a 4-hour nap, and then wake up, make and eat dinner, and then go back to bed. So anyways, so yeah, I did the weekend option for a while, and then I worked full time for a little bit, for about a year probably, and we had a nanny. So I had a full-time nanny and a part-time nanny, depending on what time I was working, basically. So I did the 6 to 3:30 shift, and that was a full-time nanny. And then I did a 3 to 11:30 shift, I think it was, or 10:30. I don't know. I guess 11:30. And we had a part-time nanny for that because King Bee came home like around 6, and so she only had to stay from like 2 to 6 or something. So we had a nanny. We had another nanny. That was when I had 3 kids, and then when I had 4, I worked part-time, and I had a nanny that watched them 2 days a week. So the first nanny I paid very well and ended up not being able to. It just wasn't worth it. But the second nanny was a friend, a close friend, and I think she charged me. It wasn't much. It was pretty negligible for us. I think it was like $100 a day for 4 kids, and she did 2 days a week. So it was, I mean, pretty negligible compared to what I was making. So that was more of a friend situation. And now my kids are old enough to stay on their own. They have grandparents here, and they just have their responsibilities and they do their things. I have 3 teenagers, so they're old enough to do their thing. So nannies and grandparents and night shift. I know a lot of people work from home, and I know one single mom, and she has 2 little girls, and she's technically work from home, but she works from her car in the parking lot while her kids go to co-op. And then when co-op is done, it's a fairly long co-op day, and I think she does 2 days a week. And so they do like 2 classes in the morning, then go to lunch, then 2 classes in the afternoon. And she takes them to lunch, and single mom works from her car. And then I grew up with a lady that had 4 kids, and she was homeschooling in the 80s and 90s, and had 4 kids. Actually, her husband left her because he didn't agree with her homeschooling the kids, and she said, I'm going to homeschool the kids, and it came to the point of divorce, and so he left her with the kids, which is such a baffling thing to me. Anyways, she basically lived on church handouts and handicrafts. So, I mean, that's not an ideal living, but she thought it was worth it, and to the point that she divorced her husband over it, and she homeschooled all 4 of her kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. So
that last sentence definitely threw us all off a waterfall.
What was
That's
what?
intense.
Yeah.
She left her husband over it.
She did. Yeah, it's pretty bonkers to me too.
I mean,
that
believe
story
me,
took a turn.
It sure did a little bit. Okay. That was a lot. Let me give a quick one to respond. One thing that you would definitely say, especially based on that last one, but even where you started, was have you ever responded to anyone and just say, "Oh no, it's easy. There's no problem."
I want to sarcastically say, yeah, all the time, but no, of course not.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would pitch the idea of, well, obviously someone needs to stay home, or how do you homeschool and work? And as I've heard you many times, you don't tend to start out with a really defeatist attitude and say, it's really, really hard and kind of awful, even though maybe many times it is, because you've done it and you know that you can do it, and you've seen a lot of people who didn't think they could do it, and it's important to keep that in mind, but you've never given the impression that it's not going to be difficult.
No, and it's a choice. I mean, it's like working out. Is working out difficult? Yeah. Is it hard to keep your butt in gear? Yeah. Is it worth it? Absolutely. That's it. That's what it's like to me.
That's a good point. Yep. My favorite response to thinking that way is to realize that you're going to be making a sacrifice one way or the other, but the right thing to do is to pick the sacrifice. You pick the sacrifice that's hard, but it'll work out in a better direction that you think is important, that you value for yourself and your family, or you don't pick by default, and whatever happens just ends up happening, and it might not end up where you want at all, or even in the direction of where you want it to go.
Absolutely.
It often doesn't go in the direction you think it's going to go. And it goes in a better direction most of the time, not always, but it's always in a learning direction. And I think the most important thing for me that I've learned as a parent is that I'm learning along with my kids. And I don't mean I'm learning math along with my kids. I mean, we are learning how to deal with life together. My sister-in-law, she's lost a lot of people in her life. I mean, she has had the most trauma, and she's walked through it with 6 children. And she's had, for example, 2 brothers die several years apart, but the kids knew both of them. And so the kids learned how to deal with grief, like terrible, terrible, heart-wrenching depression, like can't get out of my bed grief. They have that now. They have that in their skill set. That kind of grief I've been fortunate enough not to have. I've lost a lot of people, but never anybody as close to me as a sibling. And I'm very fortunate to not have to have had that. But her kids already have that. They already know how to walk through grief. And that's, I mean, that's just one more testament to homeschooling, because they've learned something that's way beyond the scope of what school would teach. And the fact that she didn't send them away to school, but they sat with her in bed when she could barely wrench herself out of the bed. They sat with her in that, and they cried with her. And that, there's so much more to that than you can ever get from school.
Goodness, this conversation got real fast.
Sorry.
But that's life, isn't it? I mean, you're with your family, and you're going to face things together. The separation related to them being in the federal penitentiary box on the street doesn't sound like as ideal as being together as a family. So just a little response to what you were just saying.
Hey, Fizzy, did you have a question?
Hello, guys. Well, it's probably not more of a question. It's more of the life experience. Something similar. Well, your sister-in-law, but I never had this kind of experience. A personal experience was a bit different. I didn't. I had a big family, right? My mother always tried to stay very close to her with her like cousins and aunts and everyone. And it wasn't very long until the first person in my life who I actually knew, who was close to me, who died. I think I was about just after 18, about 20, when my friend crashed in. Basically, he crashed. So yeah, that was a very bad experience. If I would experience it while I was a child, might be it wasn't be so horrible, but I was old enough, might be 22 I was when it happens. And like I had the 3 months, it was absolutely terrible for me. Like I was sleeping and my dreams was like, Resident Evil, like all those dogs and everything. It's awful. I can't bear even a thought that one day I will be gone and I won't be able to protect my kids, to be there for them. it's awful. So my condolences, though. But on a more positive thought, hello guys, how are you? I love you.
Heyo.
Good to hear from you.
Love you,
Thanks
buddy.
for joining.
So what kind of
I'm always here to support you guys. Well, if I'm awake.
All right.
what kind of question were you looking to be asked again?
We're doing the title is Stump the Queen. We're given a few opportunities for, what are the common difficulties for ideas of homeschooling, and maybe some hard questions that I've got a few that feel like they're unanswerable, but Her Majesty just might have the answer to it. And the first one that we just asked was if you're working and homeschooling with your kids at the same time, how easy is that? And yeah, it's really important to realize that that's hard. It's a important decision. It is a deliberate decision, and to take it seriously. That's definitely true. But it's the more rewarding of the two choices. We can at least say that much.
I've got one if you guys are interested.
Let's go.
All right. One that I don't agree with either, but I've seen in Twitter comments and elsewhere, but that parents are not qualified to be teachers, or not all parents are qualified to be teachers.
I love this one. And my answer is teachers aren't qualified to be teachers either. But
Boom.
the longer answer is teachers are not taught to be teachers as much as they are taught to do crowd control. And they do, and Uncle Al can speak to this more because he is educated in this fashion, but I think a lot of it has to do with crowd control. But I would go somewhere else with this and just say that the most important person in a teaching journey, in a learning journey, in an education journey, the most important person is the person being educated. And if you actually look at the best methods of teaching, it's when they're self-directed. And so, yeah, I would say parents aren't qualified and nobody else is qualified. And the best person, the one that is qualified, is the learner.
Kids don't need school. They need to be presented with good information and then eventually learn how to learn for themselves. And if you understand what that means, it means kids don't need teachers either. The teacher that all children needs is themselves. They need to learn how to teach themselves what it is that matters to them to achieve the goals, to make them capable in whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. If that's the way of thinking, if that's our way of thinking, then we are scaffolding, we are guiding, we are preparing, we are helping to direct our children to stumble upon and then eventually be good at that process. So that doesn't require you to be the expert in, say, calculus or engineering or philology or 19th century French poetry, right? Or what did you say that one day? Brain chemistry, PhD in brain chemistry and PhD in engineering and rocket science. I think that's what you said.
I usually say something about rocket surgery and another thing is schools became a lot of schooling started in like ancient Greece, and that came at a time where there wasn't access to a lot of books. Right now, and they were trying to load people up with information so they can memorize it, basically. But we carry a calculator in our pockets. We carry a full computer in our pockets. We carry Grok. Like, you can look up anything on Grok. So I hate to say teachers are obsolete, but what you really need are learners. You need to prepare the way for learning and encourage learning and growth and personal growth. So, yeah, teachers can be YouTube and Grok.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like teachers, yeah, they're just about obsolete these days with what we have. We have smartphones, we have tablets that can help us learn, we have current events that help us learn. We have just about everything at our disposal these days to help us learn. We have libraries. We have
Movies?
Yeah, movies. We have TV. We have sports. We have just about everything. The news.
We have an almost unending amount of available resources to help people learn things. And in fact, it probably is a little bit related to the idea that all information is now almost infinitely available at your fingertips. And 100 years ago, that wasn't true. 200 years ago, that was not only assumed, it was the natural state, is that we did not have that much information. The amount of information you had available was very limited. And I think as a species, we have proven that the problem wasn't wasn't a lack of information. In fact, we're almost worse off in the face of infinite information. It's almost better to have a curated and careful, not carefully, but limited, kind of filtered amount of information, especially when they're young, until they are ready to geek out about something that they're really interested in, and then the world is their burrito, so to speak.
You know, a real dangerous thing is back like over 100 years ago or something, when the Vanderbilts and Rockefellers were a thing. They were billionaires who decided on the educational system that we all had to be in. So that's the danger of billionaires deciding things.
Hard to argue with that. Anything else on that subject? I've got another question. Oh, nope. I've got a response. It was
Hold on.
teachers.
Busy has
Oh, good. Okay, sorry. You know what? I actually can't see the hands, so I'm gonna have to trust y'all on that one.
So, Fizzy, we're not doing hands. You can just pop in whenever you want.
Good.
Okay, cool. Now, if you finish that thought, I just had a question. Basically, how to encourage my kids to do some sort of sport. I want them to be physically fit, but whatever I'm trying, it doesn't work.
I have some thoughts on that, if I may.
Go for it.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey yo.
Fizzy, I think one thing to consider is that you know, sometimes what you consider sport might not be, you know, every sport's not the same for everybody. I didn't figure out the sports that I really enjoyed and could excel at until I was, you know, a mom, unfortunately. But I think especially when it comes to physical fitness and health, to encourage movement. So it's not just necessarily sport, although sport is valuable because there's team dynamics and there's rules and other aspects, but movement.
Sorry, for interrupting. That's one kind of, some sort of physical exercises. It's just a language barrier, so it was easier for me to say sport. But yeah, that's what I mean, like some sort of physical exercises for them.
Yeah, there's great value in learning how to lift weights and how to build stamina and, you can do 100 push-up challenge where you build, every other day, how many push-ups you do to get to the point where you can do a lot of them, or, chin-ups, hiking, swimming, bicycle. I think it's valuable to teach kids things that they can do for the rest of their lives that are good for their health, and that, it's good for their mental health as well as their physical health.
That's my goal. Just because I'm asking, like, now in UK, I don't know how's it your place, guys, but now my kids have like a week holiday, right? And on Friday, when I was picking up my son from school, he gave me a leaflet like for the box. Yeah, my friends are going from school. I want to go there. When mom, my wife, took him to that boxing, first of all, he didn't want to go there. He was like crying. On Monday, he didn't want to go there already. Mom still took him. They actually, basically, it's a class for the whole week, right? And every day lessons 4 hours. I consider that's probably a bit too long. It shouldn't be like that. We didn't know, we didn't prepare any food. We just take him there on Monday. In 2 hours, we got phone call from there, like he had enough. But yeah, he didn't have food, so fair enough. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, we couldn't make him, but he told us that he's gonna go Thursday, Friday, so tomorrow, after tomorrow. Like, he enjoyed it, but he didn't enjoy the bit that he was there alone. He didn't know anyone in there. His sister, my daughter, refused to go, refused to do anything. So yeah, that was the issue for him, that he didn't want to go there alone.
Fizzy, I want to answer your question directly to you. But would you mind if I generalize it a little bit? And I'm going to pitch it
Sure, man.
we're going to stump the
I
queen.
know you're quite brainy, so I will get
Stop it.
I will
Okay.
try to anyway.
What if I repackaged that as, okay, Queen, Your Majesty, Queen Bee, what do you do when your child is refusing to engage or is just disinterested and disconnected altogether?
So that's kind of the direction I was actually going to go with it too. I would try something else. I mean, so my first thought is it depends on if you paid for the class, and if he begged you for it, I think I would handle it the same way. In fact, I would just handle it the same way you did. I think you did a good job of that. I think you're not gonna have him interested if you push him too much. At the same time, it's not gonna be fun, and it's just gonna be a miserable experience for everybody, and he's not gonna want to do anything anymore. I'm guessing that's how my kids would be, at least. So my thought would be mostly just try a bunch of things, and something's gonna stick. I have one daughter that's really into archery. All 4 of my kids tried archery though, and I made them finish out the semester. Like if I'm gonna buy a class in archery for you, because that's what it amounts to, I want you to at least finish it. And they know the deal. If they sign up for it, they have to finish it. They have to do it. And, give it their best shot. But after that, they don't have to sign up for it anymore. And so they've tried a bunch of things. I mean, we've tried everything, I think. So yeah, just try a bunch of things. And if he likes it, cool. If he doesn't, cool. Another thing is if you're active and you're doing stuff. So my husband does Spartan races, and he trains all year for them, and it's fun. So for Christmas, I got him and my son a Spartan race that's local, and it's one that my husband really likes doing, and so now my son's going to do it with him. So that's another way. Make it a father-son kind of, and you can make it really like special and sweet for you guys if you do something together. So maybe, the boxing class sounds really cool. If you can find, maybe if he's really into it and he doesn't want to go alone, maybe possibly you could find one where you could go with him, or another activity where you could go with him. That might help. Or if you can find like baseball, for example, that you can be a coach, or any kind of martial arts where you can both go at the same time. So just be open to a bunch of things, and maybe try them with him.
All right, that was adorable to make it a bonding session, but maybe just drive him into the middle of the nearby forest and tell him to walk back.
I would say that the bonding is one of the best ways to help
for sure,
a child learn, because that's what helped me when I was younger. Someone to bond with and do stuff with. I was
joking with that last comment. My response a little bit.
Just before you continue with your real response, sure. Sometimes I'm calling my friend like, "Why you not coming in to visit?" He's saying, "I've got kids." I'm telling, and that's the thought I actually told him. I told him release them to the wild.
Okay, good. Sorry, that's probably going to work on some kids at some points, but I wouldn't really recommend that one. I was going to respond in another way. When they're not connecting to, so there's you and there's your child, and when they're not connecting to a third thing, so that could be a worksheet. Obviously, I'm not encouraging worksheets. It could be a book. It could be a project. It could be a something they're supposed to be learning, something they've decided to learn. Maybe it's just like you said, they are signed up for this archery class. And so there's you, that's the first person, or actually we could say the child is the first person. Then there's a second person, and that's you. And then there's a third thing. And one of the keys is to consider this. The main thing you need to do is connect with them and encourage them to connect with you. You don't need to force connection with that third thing. There's always going to be a third thing. There are going to be plenty of things that they're going to connect with that third thing on better than others. Plenty of things that they're never going to connect with that third thing on. But the manner in which you're able to connect with them through any of that is a foundation. That's a fundament. It's a fundamental concern. And to say that whenever you meet resistance to a third thing, one of the things you want to check is if they're just giving resistance to you. Sort of period. And that's just a check, for yourself to make sure that you don't put that third thing first. It doesn't mean we never push our kids, but especially when they're younger, this isn't as big of a thing. Maybe when they're much younger. I think there's an age here, isn't there, Your Majesty? If you're talking about a 10 or 11 or 12 or 13-year-old, deciding to sign up for something, it'd be good to set up some kind of expectation, which is, we're going to do this and you're going to sign up for it. And you don't have to love it, but you have to finish. There's something like that that's right that may not be exactly the same if they're 4. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I signed all my kids up for soccer one summer, and I think my twins were 7-ish, and my oldest was, I guess, should have been 9 or 10, and my youngest little boy was about 4, and he was on a preschool team, and he just wandered around, and he was super uninterested. That was just not his thing, and he's never liked soccer. And I wasn't gonna force him. I mean, that's just gonna make him grumpy and mad, and it's not gonna go anywhere good. So yeah, for sure, there's definitely an age limit. And the 7-year-olds, I didn't have to push it, and the 10-year-old, I didn't have to push the soccer on them. They all enjoyed it. It was a good time for the girls, but my youngest little guy was not into it, and it was completely opposite of what I expected. And so that's another thing. You never know what they're gonna like. That's why I try a lot of things, because yeah, I mean, you never know.
I agree with your son on soccer.
I have some thoughts too.
Bring it.
So when kids are like learning physical development, there's kind of like a hierarchy of like how you're actually supposed to develop them physically. And I used it as a base. So a lot of it, like, especially if they're younger, like if your kids are younger, you really don't need to put them into any sort of specialized sports, because you don't actually want them to. You just want them to build the basics of, functional movement, which is primarily through play. And so at the structural bottom of that pyramid would be gymnastics. But gymnastics is like, essentially when it comes down to it, it's coordination, it's balance, it's strength, and all of that stuff. And you could do most of that at the park. So you don't need to put your kids necessarily, especially if they're younger. Like we would go because it's winter here. So obviously we needed indoor places to run around. So we would do gymnastics and stuff. They would, when they were really little too, they would have mommy and me classes. When they were a little bit older, we would just go to tons of drop-ins. So you're dropping in at a free play gymnastics center. We would do it all the time. And they just get to run around, play, enjoy everything. Like they could use the beam, the bars, the trampoline, like whatever they want. And it's interacting with you, and then just play. And then on top of that, we would just try out every homeschool group whenever they would do, oh, we're playing Frisbee today, we're playing soccer, we're doing whatever. They would go try it, like nothing organized. I don't think we did a couple classes here or there organized, tried for swim, whatever. But like really, really little, it was like all just through physical activity, play, and like, we'd go to the park for 5 hours. We'd go swimming in the pool. We'd do whatever. And then only when they were older and they wanted to start to try some more organized stuff. And then you kind of figure out what the child is interested in. So like my son, he only plays basketball this year. He doesn't really particularly like it, but only because he's doing it on a team with a friend. So like the motivation for him was 100% friend based. And then whereas like he does jujitsu, which he just loves because that's like his sport that he loves. My dad does judo. So they talk about that tons. They, talk about fighting. My dad will fight with him. So you like any sort of interaction that works through what they like, but you only approach that when they get older. Usually you don't have to do it when they're young. So if they're little and they don't like classes, or if they don't like any specific sport, even till the point where they're like 10, 11, it doesn't really matter.
Yep. I was going to pitch it at also as you were describing, the meaningful question. If they need to see it as meaningful, then they're probably old enough to start learning to think that way. If they're not going to do it just because they don't like it because they're 6 years old, then they like what they like and they don't like what they don't like, and they probably don't need a speech about why it's meaningful. But, once they get to 10, 11, 12, this is something that, they're here, the Prescotts, and that they say all the time. He might follow up with what I'm about to say because I'm stealing his words, which is, if you can't express why it's important to learn something or do something to an adequately to your child, then, you're not qualified to make that case or try to convince them. It's okay, by the way. You don't need to, maybe, or now's not the time, or there will be a time and maybe you need to spend some more time thinking about it yourself. But there's no need to be super forceful or pushy. That's something I think is worth mentioning. People tend to, including children, tend to only pursue what they see as meaningful or what they really like. So that's why finding that out is just as important as, helping them, complete things that they started, or to do things that you think are meaningful. It's important to make sure that you see it that way. I just wanted to respond with that, but that was a really, really good point.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate that. I have a bit of a cold, so don't worry about that.
Sorry to hear that.
That's all right. One of the things I will say that is, if we start off with something that we can do with our children, even if it's like family game night, is an excellent idea to get them involved in what we're doing. It's like what Denz was talking about. um, you know, if we can do things together, like my daughter went into Taekwondo. Well, mom has a black belt in Taekwondo. And so both of them signed up together, you know, to do that Taekwondo. Same with my daughter and her in pickleball. And then we all took a fencing class together, all three of us. Just to see, what interests us. But the thing is we're in the journey together with them. And that's really makes a big difference as far as child and parent bonding, is the fact that we're doing it together, even if it's as simple as family game night. And that can lead into a lot of different things. When they're young, the family game night is fantastic. Like, one of our favorite games is Yahtzee. And it involves even mathematics and pattern recognition and that sort of thing. But I encourage people to not just put them in things that they might be interested in, but plan ahead and see if you can actually be involved in those. My daughter loves the Pokemon playing cards, and so she got my wife involved in that. And then they have their own decks. I wasn't really crazy about Pokemon, but I did enjoy playing with my daughter on Minecraft. And then she got involved in the coding aspect of that, and did some things. But we actually had an interesting moment where I was playing Minecraft with her. And a few months prior to that, we had lost a cat that she grew up with. And I noticed that on her Minecraft base, she had a memorial to our cat. And it really sparked a conversation between us. And because I thought that she was kind of done grieving a little bit, but I noticed that she wasn't. And the conversation that ensued, because I was there and I saw that, was really meaningful to us.
Excellent. And so I'm going to circle back around to the primary question was, what do you do in the face of maybe your child not being engaged? And I think one of the important points is to, instead of reacting to that point, is being proactive to deliberately arrange your life with your children, and arrange things in such a manner that you are including your kids in things that interest you all. I don't know if everyone's noticed this, but like a family that all get in their van and go out hiking and go out to the trails and they go camping, they talk about themselves as being people who go camping. I know kids who get in bikes and their dad is a super cyclist and they just ride bikes together all the time. And so guess what? Their whole family is a family of people who ride bikes. And so the involvement that you have with one another tends to color the relationship in such a manner that you're engaged together and in that third thing, but it's you're doing it all together. I just feel like at every level, whether that's about anything particularly academic, or if it's about sports and athleticism and working out and being active, or various other things, game night, all that, it's really about how you can build the engagement together as a family. I think that's an important feature that I've heard many of you say.
You know what I see a lot, or have seen a lot? is, and I guess it's a question, is like people who have right-leaning viewpoints are unfit to homeschool. And I guess that's a question. I don't know. I've seen people say that on here.
That kind of brings me back to our previous question before we went this direction with Fizzy's prompting. Was parents aren't qualified to homeschool, and it may be related also to what you were saying just now. But I wanted to come at it from another direction, and maybe Your Majesty has something else to say about that, to kind of broaden out your question there, Narm, to what we were saying before, which is parents aren't qualified to teach. And Her Majesty's great response first was teachers aren't qualified to teach either. And the most important thing to realize is the most significant teacher in every child's life is themselves. But I wanted to say a lot of the concern about the qualities or qualifications or capacity for parents to be a part of the learning and teaching for their children is that they look at the massive gargantuan nonsense machine known as government education, and they think, oh, well, I could never do that. And I'm happy to report, no, you can't, and you should never do that. Please don't do that. So the fact that you can't is a huge bonus, because no one should be doing that. And if you were to say, well, I'm not qualified to do that, good. What you want to be thinking about is what is beneficial and helpful and lovely about being the parent who's teaching their children at home, which should look nothing like what it looks like in the federal penitentiary box down on the street. And so that's actually a good thing. Parents aren't qualified to teach. Good. They're not qualified to teach in that way. There's something else that they need to be doing that we can talk about. And I can assure you, even people who do not believe they are qualified for it are absolutely qualified to do that. You want to pick up from there?
Yeah, I actually couldn't hear Nicholas. Can you repeat what he asked?
He actually said he's heard some of a kind of rebuttal or objection that right-leaning parents aren't as qualified to teach at home. That might be a bit of a slap or criticism at right-leaning conservative or political people or families. I kind of wanted to not exactly go there, but sort of address the more meaningful question there, but not to say that what Narm was implying isn't something that we've all heard before. But I kind of just wanted to go a little slightly different direction, if that's okay with Narm.
Yes.
Jordan, do you want to?
Yeah.
Jordan, do you want to pick it up?
Yeah, so I think the problem with having right-leaning parents teaching their kids is that they won't teach them that they can choose their gender um, at any age they want. So I think that's the biggest problem with allowing that. I think that should be disallowed. I think only left-leaning parents should be able to teach their children at home.
So going on about the right-leaning parents that not being qualified, I actually have a meme about that that's kind of funny too. Actually, I have a couple of them, but basically they say, no, you can't indoctrinate your children with your values. You have to indoctrinate them with mine. And that sums it up for me. Like, I learned in, I think, sociology in college that everybody has a worldview, and you always come into everything with a bias. And so I don't want those people with those weird worldviews to be teaching my kids. I want them to get my weird worldview. So what?
And that's exactly what it is. And that's the word that gets thrown around a lot, is indoctrination. And yeah, they just don't, especially they, for some reason, really target religious homeschoolers, and they don't like that very much.
Now that you're putting it that way, I do want to respond to that, which is there are two words, the word indoctrination and the word propaganda. Those are connotatively given as being negative, but actually that's the same thing as teaching your children a way of life. And so if you think it's your way of life and you like it, then you are absolutely propagandizing, because the word means propagating, and you are indoctrinating, which means you're teaching them a certain way of thinking. That's not a bad thing. To think of it as a bad thing would mean that you've assessed that it is insidious, what you're teaching them, that is, anti-life, anti-human, bad for them, however you want to put that. We've certainly seen many examples of those in history, But the solution to not teaching people bad propaganda and bad indoctrination is not no propaganda and no indoctrination, because guess what? It will just get filled with a bad indoctrination and a bad propaganda. So you need to pick the best that you have and give that to your children. So the idea that that shouldn't be allowed is in fact itself a pernicious way of thinking. You should absolutely be teaching your children what you think will help them be the best people by your family's views and values, and that's exactly what you should be doing, which if someone else wants to call that indoctrination and propaganda, so be it.
Well, the very nature, I mean, uh, any education run by the state will never not be indoctrination
100%.
or propaganda. So, and that's something that they don't realize is it's statism, whereas a family, it's society.
Yeah, and that's why the assumption when they say that when you do that to your children, it's considered indoctrination or propaganda, that is itself a pernicious way of trying to imply that your way is not the healthy way. That the agreed upon collectively way is the healthy way, and that's silly. My children are not everyone else's children; they're my children, and so I'm going to do what I think is the best. And I don't know if anyone's ever thought about this, but you could you could give your children your way of being, and or you can try to give them another way of being. Guess what? They're going to pretty much end up the way you are either way. So you might as well brush yourself up and be a good person and help them be good people. And that is really what is the same thing as the word propaganda, which is to propagate a way of life, to, a way of thinking. And so, yeah, I would like to dispel the idea that that's bad fundamentally. It's the opposite of that's an anti-truth. It's actually very, very good.
You know what's funny about that turning out like your parents and stuff is like I fought that my whole life and like not trying to be like my parents. And later in life, I've come to realize like opening the door, saying thank you and you're welcome to people and stuff. That's like totally my mom, because my mom always does that. She's always courteous. She's always good to other people. Never negative thing to say about anyone. And I guess she propagated that into me.
Absolutely. I love that.
Do you guys have any other questions? Any other Stump the Queen?
I do, but I'd like to give some other people some chance. Come on, everybody.
Okay, what's the best Godzilla movie to watch while homeschooling?
The oldest one you can find.
The one made out of stop motion, like claymation stuff.
If you can find a flip book one.
Well, the first Godzilla movie was the first monster movie to not include stop motion.
Oh, that's right.
I'm all for the rubber suit models.
I agree. I prefer suitmation over animation. Animation takes away the job of the people building the miniature cities.
And especially like the episode with Godzilla versus Ultraman.
Without putting the Prescotts on the spot necessarily, is there a common rebuttal that people like to slide into your comments with?
I'm sorry, I didn't get to catch that last part.
Yeah, my son and daughter are sort of fighting, but not actually injuring each other. They're just mad at each other. Oh my goodness! Now he just ran into a wall. I'll let somebody else do a question. You okay, bud? Come here.
I can pick up. I heard what he said, Jonathan. He said, "What is the most common rebuttal you get? What's objection?" The theme of the evening is to stump the queen, so we were going to ask Her Majesty hard questions and see what her responses were. So, how about for you? What's kind of the most common? We've discussed some of the things you've already heard. So, if it's a repeat of what we said, it's okay. But if there was something that you've heard as a really common objection, or
yes.
Yeah, go on.
It's what about the poor? It's always the lowest common denominator. It's like, well, what are you what how are the poor, and they grow it to some unusual thing that they have to be poor, single mothers, in wheelchairs, just anything else, and then that's supposed to stump me on that.
Okay,
And
hold on. Your Majesty, do you mind if I try to see what you would say about that? Jonathan, do you mind if I pitch that at the?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're pitching that at the Queen.
Sure.
I mean, I would go back to the working question. If you can work and homeschool at the same time, and just say, I know single mothers who work and homeschool at the same time. One of them works from home on a computer, and the one that that I brought up that everybody was floored by is she's actually still a friend of my parents, and her husband divorced her because she said she was going to homeschool the kids, and this was in the 80s and 90s. And she said, I'm going to homeschool the kids whether you like it or not. And they divorced, and somehow she still was able to raise the kids or homeschool the kids. And she basically lived on church donations and handicrafts. She sold a bunch of handicrafts. She sold like baked goods and crocheted stuff, and my parents gave her a car, and the church gave her a lot of stuff, place to live, I think. So the point of that being, where there's a will there's a way, and it's not, is it easy? No. Is it worth it? I definitely believe so. Like exercising, it's definitely worth it. And
I'd like to chime in real quick on that too.
Please do.
The argument, what about the poor, is almost exclusively about building a straw man argument, at, you know, as a precursor to tax justification. Uh, you know, in a standard distribution, the tail ends of the curve never goes to zero. So it's even like what Jesus said: the poor will be with you always. And even in the American system of public school, they don't serve everyone either. And so to argue that, oh well, since homeschooling, only the rich do this, that's absolutely not true. I mean, I've got studies that talk about the poor where, let's see if I got that handy here. The wealthy, 200,000 plus, homeschool at a 3% rate, whereas the poor, less than 25,000 a year, homeschool at almost a 6% rate. So the thing is the distribution of homeschooling through the various income levels. There's a lot more homeschooling percentage wise on the lower income levels.
I think one of the features of the homeschool question, in comparison to the government education system, as a response to someone in those situations, is the government federal penitentiary box on the street performing the worst possible form of daycare for your children might sound obviously like the answer, but I would certainly pose that there is much more flexibility in the homeschool arrangement. The extent to which you can be very flexible is a huge feature and benefit in its favor in comparison to um, the you have to send your children for a 40 hour a week full time job at the federal penitentiary system box on the street where they get childcare and the needs of do you need to still work, do both parents need to still work, are you a single parent, much more flexible in to the extent and degree that we could uh, accomplish what is needed for homeschooling, especially at the earliest ages where you don't need 40 hours a week of education. You need about 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half. And so the rest of the time there's other things. And so finding flexibility of, nearby moms or nearby family members or something to help with the kids, that will take a little bit of work, but I think the open-ended flexibility of the homeschooling arrangement actually should cover whatever the concern was there.
You guys just reminded me of the wildest conversation I ever had about homeschooling, which was because that my experience too, like knowing tons of people in the community, it's really not like a wealthy thing to do. It's just a thing that people do. A lot of the moms still, work part-time or they'll do other things or whatever. And in general, like a lot of the wealthy people, they'll tend to private school if they're going to do anything. That's, seems to be where they go. And especially because like the jobs that tend to lead to those sorts of amounts of money lead to, really well-connected schools and stuff like that. So you tend to see that skew that way. But the conversation I had was with someone and they grew up very poor. And they were saying that it was rude of me to homeschool my kids because the poor kids in the schools or the less smart kids need the well-mannered and smarter kids to have role models. And so therefore, by me keeping my kids home, it was being selfish.
Yes, exactly. It is being selfish. Correct. Next. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's literally what I said. I'm like, I don't care. Like, they're my kids.
Yeah. I saw a couple hands, and I don't know that this was the order, but was it Jordan and then Wolf Dog? I don't know what the order was. I couldn't see.
I don't know actually. Wolf Dog, were you first? Okay.
Go ahead.
So I just want to echo what you're saying about you don't need to be rich. I want to paint a picture of my homeschooling experience. So my mom started thinking about homeschooling back in like the 80s, back when, it just wasn't really there wasn't really a word for it that she knew of, but she felt like she should. She felt like Heavenly Father was guiding her that direction, and so she was like doing some research back into it, asking different moms, and found out some others were doing this. Um, and fast forward 10 years, my mom got divorced from my dad, which was a good decision. Um, he wasn't a great guy, but that aside. Um, she decided to still homeschool. She still felt like that was important, even though she was a single mom. And my dad, I'm trying to remember again, I don't remember all the specifics, but he didn't pay very much in child support. I want to say it was like $500 a month or something like that. Wasn't a ton, and $500 back then was a little bit more than it is today, but still not a ton, right?
Hmm.
But I'm trying to also remember, like for instance, I think our rent for a 3 bedroom house was around $500 as well. Um, so not very much. So she was doing things, like baking bread, ironing for people, trying to stay at home and homeschool 5 children. I honestly don't know how she did it because it takes both my wife and I to a lot of effort to homeschool 4 children, and I'm working full time, right? So I don't know how she did it, but she did it, and all her kids have gone to college, have graduated college. All for the most part, everyone got high grades too. I think some of them chose gaming over studying, but that's what kids do at college sometimes. So my point is that really you don't need to have Veritas Press or some expensive curriculum. You don't need to have some state of the art math program. Saxon Math is great, and you can always buy hand me down books. There's a way to do it, and I'm sure there's homeschooling co-ops or whatever on Facebook Market, whatever that will sell you their used books. There's ways to do it. If my mom could do it, I'm not sure there's anyone that was more poor than my mom, and she's raising 5 children, homeschooling 5 children. She didn't work nights, so she was up with us. Again, looking back, I don't know how she did it, but it's totally possible. And if the Lord wants you to homeschool or is guiding you that way, and you say, "I wish we could, but we can't because it doesn't make financial sense," I say just do it. Follow those promptings and just homeschool. Because the Lord will help you find a way to do it. That's it.
Special guest speaker with Jordan's mom coming soon.
Hey, she's on Twitter here, so
Oh my God.
I'll connect her with you. Bow tied. She'd love to talk. She could talk a lot about everything at homeschooling. So
Oh, that'd be awesome, Jordan. That'd be so fun.
yeah.
That was amazing. I'll pitch something back at you in a minute, but Wolf Dog, did you want to hit it?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick about the poverty discussion. I feel like in a lot of ways, when it comes to education, when it comes to a lot of things, really, the poverty discussion is a bit of a red herring. Um, in the sense that if money would solve poverty, then like California wouldn't have any homeless people, you know? Um, the thing is that it's a much more complicated problem. What you generally have, not always, right, but very often what goes along with poverty is things like absent fathers, generational trauma, this sort of stuff. And this is very difficult to solve via education alone.
Absolutely.
Right? Like there are a lot deeper issues going on there. And like the people generally are in whether or not there's a financial issue. When people have a lot of trauma happening around them, they tend to be essentially in fight or flight mode, which we know shuts down your prefrontal cortex and makes it very difficult to learn or to even think rationally. And so anyway, I just wanted to add that in a lot of ways, it's not even a question of poverty is a much deeper question than just not having enough money.
Yeah, beautiful.
I will agree. There's a point where trauma does override your ability to learn. I have experienced that myself.
Yeah, and the point that's important to make there is that when you're homeschooling, even if you're not that great at it, but you're providing an environment where the child feels safe, then they're obviously having the best possible chances of receiving a decent education. And I say that to juxtapose it against the federal penitentiary box down the street. What are the chances that they're not always in fight or flight mode anyway, just because of the way they're treated by their peers? Not to mention they're in a box for
Yeah,
40 hours a week, sitting at a desk forced to do worksheets.
Yeah, that is what I believe caused a lot of trauma for me.
Yeah, go on, Wolf Dog.
I was just going to say to that point, I was born to a teenage mother, and so I experienced some of this stuff firsthand. When I was a teenager, I spent a fair amount of time in juvenile jail, which was basically like a group home. It was just a regular home for the most part. The doors were open; you could leave anytime you wanted. But what would happen is that if you left the easy jail, they would find you and then you'd go to a much harder place. So for the most part, nobody really left. It was pretty easy. But to be honest with you, I actually enjoyed the time that I spent in jail more than I enjoyed going to public school. And I'm not exaggerating. It was actually a much calmer, safer environment in a lot of ways.
Somehow I don't doubt that.
You went down a different path than me.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. That's the line I did not expect from this evening's chat. I enjoyed being in an actual federal penitentiary than being in the fake education federal penitentiary system. That was I wasn't expecting that.
I'm
That was
not,
amazing.
I I experienced a lot of violence in public schools, and also, like, to be honest, I did my fair share as
Sure.
well. But especially at that time, right? Like, we're talking late '90s, early aughts kind of time frame. Yeah, I mean, things were a little bit less strict, let's say,
Sure.
than they are now, and so there was still a little bit of that boys will be boys ethos, and so you could get away with quite a lot.
Yeah, I stopped a few fights in the teaching, and I think I saw on average, like as a rate, actually more than I remember seeing in the schools when I was a kid, and I paid attention. So interesting. That was a really good point.
Um,
Go on.
can I ask a generalized question to you guys? Have you guys seen a lot of fist fights outside of school?
Yes.
I've seen the most fights at school, probably. I mean, it's kind of close now, but their fighting was very common. I mean, it was like a weekly, at least monthly occurrence where there would be a big fight that a lot of people saw.
Yeah, I will say that being autistic, I was often on the receiving end of the fights.
Yeah, you're saying in comparison to the data of just general society versus inside the box. That's a good question. My sense is that it may not actually be that different, but I can go check. I should check on that. That's a good question.
I mean, I ask because I don't see a lot of fist fights like driving down the street. I mean, I may have seen a couple in my adult life, but not a whole lot.
Oh, but I've got a
I
different
mean,
data point. How many fist fights have I seen, at homeschool? The answer isn't zero, but it might be one.
I fought with my brother one time. That was it hurt. He punches hard. So did I think. But anyways, yeah, we fought once.
Yeah, that doesn't count the pre-10 years old like scuffling, right? I mean,
No,
wrestling and kind of
we were
smacking
like
each other.
I was like 18 and he's like 6 years younger than me. So, uh, but we were both doing karate too. So we both knew how to punch and stuff. So
I see.
anyways, yeah, it definitely hurt.
Yeah, my brother, he's a pretty tough person. He got the good genetics. The genetics allowed him to beat me up all the time when I was a kid. So yeah, you definitely experienced that.
I get the feeling inside the federal penitentiary box down on the street, the government education, a lot of that kind of fighting is somewhat performative. It's boys being boys to a certain extent, and some of it is because tensions are high, and then I'm guessing some of it is even they want to be seen as a certain way, and so it has a little bit of a performance nature to it that probably wouldn't need to be attempted to be established amongst a smaller, just a smaller cohort of kids in the more flexible homeschooling environment. But that's a good point. I'm probably going to go look up that data I might get back with everybody about what that was.
Have you noticed a
Well,
severity of?
just one quick.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, stand by. Wolf Dog, you go, and then Jonathan, don't forget what you're about to say.
I was just going to say one quick point on that, Owl, is that if you look at the way that most, you put a bunch of guys
Right.
together, whether it's in a prison, whether it's in a schoolyard, right, whether it's a job site or whatever, you're going to find that they're gonna bully each other. They're gonna, press buttons,
Yes,
test boundaries, break balls, whatever, in order to kind of figure out what the
absolutely.
pecking order is. And whenever there's a disagreement about the pecking order, usually, not always, but usually, it ends up needing to be solved by some kind of violence.
Yeah, that's absolutely valid. No, I don't doubt that a bit. I can think of a couple of cases in one of the middle schools I worked at where um, I was pretty sure that a couple of the fights that I witnessed were borderline performative, like they wanted everyone to see them. Whereas I think there were some that I saw much more aligned with what you were just sharing. Anyway, that's a super good point. I'm sorry if you want to respond, you can, but also I'd like to head back over to Jonathan.
No, all good. Yeah, fair enough. I think there absolutely is a performative aspect
Right.
sometimes, but again, it's really about establishing the perception or establishing your sort of pecking order in the group, and whether it's performative or sincere, it's kind of one of those things like it works
Yeah,
or
by
it
that.
doesn't.
Yeah, good. Jonathan, what were you saying?
Yeah, I've noticed, and this is just observation, anecdotal, but I've noticed a severity of violence in school, and it seems to have been increased by just the idea of MMA. The mixed martial arts, how it became very common thing and a very in society.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, I mean, I fought in school. But the thing is after we fought, we shook hands and we understood where we were as far as the pecking order and that sort of thing. And so, but with this MMA, I can see how the severity over time has really risen. But again, that's just an observational thing. And going back to another thing is about family trauma, and
Hmm.
with the family trauma, if you ever get a chance to look at the adverse childhood experience studies that are out there on family trauma, it's really enlightening how there's a direct connection between adverse childhood experiences and all sorts of um, uh, diseases and societal problems
Adverse
as a result
outcomes
of.
like being incarcerated and so
I'm
on.
sorry.
Sorry, I said adverse outcomes like being incarcerated and
That's
so
part
on.
of it.
Yeah.
Even with increase in COPD and diabetes and everything else like this, everything's tied together, and this is still being studied, and it's one of the largest studies going on in the medical and psychological areas is the ACEs.
Interesting. I'm going to reel it back in a little bit, but you said that it was very enlightening. I would also like to make sure everyone's aware it's also very devastating. So don't wade into that discussion and reading some of that if you're not, ready for it, because it's going to be intense. And I don't mean that you shouldn't. I actually feel the opposite. You actually should, but just kind of steel yourself to think about some things that are hard to face for a lot of people. We usually stop at 20:30 Eastern time. We've gone a little bit over. I think we won't mind going just a little bit longer, unless Her Majesty says, nope, we're done. But just some thoughts, kick it back to Her Majesty Queen Bee. I think this came back around to uh, uh, the socialization question, which was certainly where we've started this series that we're doing now. It's almost the end of February. And we started with, we wanted to discuss and what do you want to say, debunk or demystify or unpack the most common rebuttals, objections, concerns, excuses for why people don't homeschool. And so we spent a few weeks talking about socialization and curriculum. And tonight was just kind of a fun idea was ask Her Majesty Queen Bee questions to see if we could stump her on other objections. And one of the last ones was Jonathan mentioned. You can help me try to frame the question again. It was where were we, Jonathan? I don't mind admitting I've just lost my train of thought.
Well, it was my question. General question was: Have you noticed an intensity of school fights that can kind of culminate from the popularization of MMA?
Oh, got it. Okay. If you don't mind, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about when you mentioned that what are we going to do with the poor if the government education goes away? Or I want to homeschool and but can't handle it. I think that actually brought us back around almost full circle to the first question, which was Queen Bee likes to get serious, mostly one on one, but loves to get serious about talking to people is, you know, can you work full or part time while being a homeschool parent? And first of all, the answer is yes. But I think, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I'd like to wrap that back around with thinking about some cases that she has and that I have about very very poor people, struggling single moms with kids. I really loved Jordan's story. That was amazing. I kind of want to pick back up right there a little bit because it is aimed at the very people who would benefit the most from the flexibility of homeschooling and are benefiting the least, being the most disadvantaged by being thrown into the federal penitentiary box down on the street. So I kind of wanted to talk about that for another minute.
Oh, sure. The thing is people don't realize that, and I'm being dead serious. They don't realize that the students, your children, have a brain also, and they say, well, you can't homeschool because you don't have a degree, or your social economic status is this, and
Hmm.
the thing is our children have a brain, and if you get them to and you teach agency and that creates a creativity, because you're not going to be very creative if you're in the fight or flight mode. So when you teach agency and you realize that your children can learn these things and learn them in a peaceful manner, it doesn't matter how the problem is. And generally, what I've seen through our coaching clients is that the fears of their losing one income when they start homeschooling, it seems like that creativity creates entrepreneurship. And so instead of losing one income, they start generating multiple streams of income, and that's something that's rarely talked about.
Wow, awesome. I'm gonna kick that back over to you, Queen Bee. You had something else to say.
So yeah, I was gonna say, my family made it work as well. My mom actually made more money than my dad when they were first married, and then they felt like Jordan's mother, my mom felt like God was telling her that they needed to homeschool us, and a bunch of things kind of came together at the time. They got to see Dr. Raymond Moore speak, and so they kind of had a guidance on where to go and what to do and how to do it. And so my mom stayed home with us, and my dad worked, and my dad didn't make a whole lot of money at the time. And there were times he got laid off. I remember he was working at a refinery, and he had a very specific, he's very skilled at what he does, and he still does it at the time at right now, but he was working at a refinery that kind of used him and abused him and paid him very little, and he knew that he was being paid very little. And during this time, they there were four of us kids at home, and I literally remember looking inside the fridge and having zero food. And my parents also are super red pilled and would never accept help from the government. So we literally ate beans and rice. Like we ate rice for breakfast and we ate beans for dinner. And there was a time when we actually ran out of food. And so there's this story about when I was about 9 years old, and I'm the oldest, and my youngest brother, so he'd have been about three. And we were sitting around the kitchen table, and we literally didn't have any food for the very first time. Actually, I think it was the only time we ever didn't have any food, and we only had condiments. I looked in the fridge and we only had condiments. And so we sat around the dinner table and prayed, and my dad said, "Heavenly Father, thank you for this food that you're about to prepare for us." And we all got up and walked away from the table, and all of us kids are like, so where's this food that we're supposed to get? And probably 20 minutes later, it was good. It was just long enough for God to stretch our faith. But about 20 minutes later, the neighbor called and said, "I was planning on having guests, but they canceled last minute." And it was her and her husband living there. And she said, "And I've got two lasagnas and fresh breadsticks, fresh homemade breadsticks and salad and carrot cake. Can I bring it over for you guys? Would you?" So I tell that whole story, one, because God is good and he's always been good to my family. And two, because like Jordan was saying, if God is calling you to this, there is no reason for you to say no. It's what he's called you to, so do it. And three, if it's a calling, it's a calling. It's not something to take lightly, and it's not something that's going to be easy. And if you're not Christian, that's okay too. People feel very strongly about homeschooling and they make it work. And the whole "you're going to be poor" thing, I mean, yeah, that happens. You make choices, you make sacrifices, and sometimes you make hard sacrifices. And that's what life's about. And that's just what it is. And so that's what I would say about poverty stuff. And my parents actually got to the point later. My dad quit that job at the refinery because so he started a business on the side and made enough money like within less than a year to quit that job. And my dad still does that on the side, and he actually doesn't even need to do that business on the side, but he's got a home in and he a home that's paid for, and he lives with us, him and my mom, um, winter with us part time as well. But anyways, he still does it on the side, and he still makes good money at it, and he doesn't even need to. And so God has blessed them in that, and they've had more than enough to share with us. So that's my anecdote.
I would like to say my assessment of this from a bunch of different angles is one of the things you're doing when you're choosing to homeschool your kids is you're aiming up. So even if you're in a pretty low spot, this is an aim upward. And number one, that will take some work and some sacrifice and some effort. But on the other hand, each step forward when you're aiming up will be an improvement. And some of those improvements will feel practical, and some of those improvements may just feel a lot like some of the other things we were saying, like there's a stronger connection between the parents and the children, and between the children and the parents, and there's a stronger bond within the family, even through adversities, even through things not working out. Um, Certainly, the experiences where something really hard happens, but it works out for good anyway, are experiences that together as a family you will not get any other way. And so there's something about one thing that I think is meaningful to point out is that freedom might actually be harder than being told what to do. And so yes, homeschooling may sound and actually require a lot more of your time and energy and resources and capacity than sending your kids to the federal penitentiary box down the street. But that kind of aiming up, every inch you crawl up is an improvement. And I think I have some ground to say that the best that happens out of the federal penitentiary box is going to happen in spite of that system, not because of it. Whereas if you produce something that takes time with you and your family in homeschooling, you produced that. It happened because of you and what you did with your children. And so I think speaking that way to parents has been really interesting. I've seen some. I mean, I'm basically in tears right now. I don't know if y'all knew this, but your Uncle Al cries all the time. I cry more than most women in your life, and I'm just thinking that kind of direction of travel for the sake of improving. It's like everyone wants that. Everyone wants that, and to assume that that's going to be the result of sending your kids to the government education system, I think the data's in. I think that's a false hope. To take it home and figure it out. Yeah, there'll be dark days, and there'll be some trying times, but I think you'll figure it out. I think is the biggest thing to take away from that way of thinking. You're aiming up, so climbing, scraping, crawling up is getting better, and that sounds rewarding. That sounds worth it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's worth it. I think that's the big takeaway. Like exercising, it's worth it. It's hard and it's worth it.
Wonderful.
You bet exercising is hard. Sometimes it's not always worth it, though, depending on your body.
That's true. Dropping the 300-pound squats on your foot, Nick, isn't a good idea, is it? Sorry, I'm just joking. Bad joke.
It's just when you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, working out can be harder.
Yeah, for sure, bud.
Working out and physical therapy are nightmares. Are you still talking?
Sorry about that. Any final concerns, questions, thoughts to stump the queen, or remarks to consider wrap up what we were talking about? Probably should stop soon for everyone's sake of everyone's time.
It doesn't seem like anyone has any questions.
Well, with that cue, I will jump in here real quick while I still can have a quiet moment. I would like to announce that my 2-year-old has pooped in the potty for the first time ever. So thank you for your moral support, even though you didn't know that was going on. But yes, I've potty trained 2 kids in 2 months. So I have 1 left in diapers officially. I mean, she's still going to wear them at night, obviously, because I don't like changing sheets every single day. But yeah, we're getting there. But other than that, I just wanted to remind everyone that we started the podcast. This will be uploaded later this week. There's another episode I'm working on right now that will be uploaded hopefully tonight, if not tomorrow. And you can find us at HiveandNest or HiveandNest Homeschooling. And then the actual the X account for the podcast has been sitting in here the whole time. It's that crown and feather down there. So if you want to follow that, we haven't done much with it yet, but we will be posting podcast episodes or links at least on that thing. But other than that, thank you, Her Majesty. Thank you, Owl, and everyone else. And that's all I got.
Congratulations.
Yeah, for real, for sure. Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. And I see Wolf Dog left. Want to say thanks if he comes back in here, listen to this, and he's really fun. He and I share a lot of spaces and have some pretty long chats about big stuff. And then everyone say I wanted to say a big thanks to Homeschool Life LLC, John, the Prescotts. He's got a wonderful book, Kids Don't Need School. He's out here on X. Y'all go check out his profile. They're really cool people. And the Prescotts wrote the Kids Don't Need School book, and it's really a fabulous book. A lot of good help in there. Anything else, Queen Bee?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jordan for telling your story and helping us out here, and for Dens for telling your stories as well, and to Nicholas for chiming in with us and hanging out with us, and for everybody else, thanks for coming and joining us. And yeah, we do these spaces every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific time. And I don't know around the world. And yeah, also check out our podcast. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having this space. Thank you for being a little bit more patient tonight, because I am a little bit slower and still not feeling too good. But yeah, I think I did pretty good tonight.
You're all right, Narm. We're always glad you're here. I had a baby. And Free Will and Mama, we're glad you're here too. My favorite little drawing of a dragon. We're glad you were here hanging out with us. Let's call it. Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a good night. Love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to contact us, please check the show notes, and don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to this.